Hello everyone, Twisted Animatronic here. Now in Five Nights at Freddy's security breach, Freddy seemed to be doing many mysterious things. You know, such as completely lying to his superiors, going against his security protocols, even his mysterious secret dialogue where he questions his entire existence.
Look at all the endos. They're all the same. Have I always been a Freddy? Am I Monty with a different shell? What if I am not the first glamrock Freddy? Are there more of me at other pizzerias? Do we all feel the same? Am I special? If I am mass-produced, am I still art?
I don't know, I'm just a kid.
Now, all of these instances amounts to something far bigger than we initially thought. Was Freddy secretly trying to tell us something which we've completely missed in Security Breach up until now? Not to mention he has this hugely cryptic dialogue right here.
But I can protect you. I am not me.
Which is still unsolved, that is, until today. Because many people believe that this is in relation to Freddy actually being possessed. You know, because he's on his way down to the old FNAF 6 pizzeria, he cleared the path, and he found himself. Now, what would that mean? People seem to think that he had found his spirit, which was Michael. I mean, we know Mike's spirit would have been down there, along with every other spirit which was drawn to the FNAF 6 pizzeria. Plus, it would have been years later for Mike to possess Glamrock Freddy, and I don't believe that to be the case. And you only have to watch the video I did a few days ago, and that video literally 100% debunks the Mike spirit in Freddy. So we're not going down that route today. So the I am not me line doesn't relate to Michael. And this is it. This is where it starts to get really interesting, because I believe Freddy was trying to tell us something. Up until this point, Freddy was initially questioning his existence anyway, and then he says the cryptic dialogue, I am not me, I found myself for the first time. Now, some people thought that that was also Freddy coming into his own existence, right? But if that was the case, the dialogue would be completely different. It wouldn't be, I am not me. It would be, I am becoming me, you know, because you're becoming a new person, a new thing. So the fact that he says, I am not me, he's telling us that he is not the Freddy we once knew. And that's the key. This realization here is that he is not Freddy. And we have heard him say this before, usually before he attacks Gregory for whatever reason. We see the Freddy clone in Help Wanted 2 say the same thing, where he says, you'll have to excuse me, I'm not quite myself at the moment. And that's basically an excuse to say he can attack the player.
I am not quite myself at the moment. Do be careful.
So this I am not me line could reference something far darker. You see, the key bit to this entire dialogue is he said he found himself for the first time. Now, he didn't find Michael. The only other thing down there which he could find in reference to himself is the Mimic. But why would he be saying he found himself to the Mimic? The Mimic isn't Freddy, right? Right? Well, this is where things get extremely interesting, because the Mimic has obviously been down there a very long time. Gregory confirms this.
I really don't know what it is, but it's been trapped down here a really long time.
We also know the computer, which is being used to hold the Mimic in his room, was built in the 1980s. This was confirmed in a developer interview with Steel Wool, meaning the Mimic was down there before the Mega Pizzaplex and was likely in one of the first pizzerias, you know, the FNAF 6 pizzeria. And it really got me thinking, why would they want to even keep the Mimic alive or even functional in this room? Wouldn't it have been simpler to simply destroy him, not build this computer program, and just be rid of him, you know, completely destroy the entire thing? That's because they clearly can't. Otherwise, they would have done it. Why would you go through the hassle of trapping this thing in a room, pouring concrete over it, then a computer program to stop it escaping? Because they can't destroy it, because it's in every animatronic, every endoskeleton, every endo. And the fact that the Mimic 01 program wasn't made by Fazbear Entertainment, it was literally made by a chap called Edwin Murray. He also made the first iteration of animatronics, the original OGs for the original location, before they were even a band. We know this because Secret of the Mimic shows coming soon posters in the factory where they're being made, and the person who makes them is Edwin Murray. He makes them with the Mimic 01 code, and that Mimic 01 code could only be made by Edwin. Thus, when he eventually dies, they'll have no way to replicate that code unless they had the original source, the original Mimic 01 program in the original Mimic, hence why they keep that Mimic alive. That would act as the sort of server for all the other animatronics and the initial blueprint. That then explains why they simply just didn't destroy the original Mimic 01. They couldn't because they needed its blueprint, which later develops into a host server. I'll get onto that later, don't worry. And I know you're probably thinking, well, what has this got to do with Freddy and all that dialogue? Well, believe you me, you need that context because now it'll start to become clear. You see, Freddy did find himself for the first time when he cleared the path. He found the Mimic. He literally found himself because the Mimic 01 program is part of Freddy, a different branch. And that explains why they start to keep the original Mimic all locked up as well, with all these nodes we see in Ruin from accessing the Pizzaplex, because we know it's already influencing the Pizzaplex as a sort of a hive mind. It's in Helpy. Helpy is suddenly guiding us to unlock all these nodes to free the Mimic. Why would it be doing that? Because it's under the control of the Mimic 01 program, the original Mimic server in that room. We see the Mimic start to infect all the other animatronics as well as the staff bots. Ruin shows us this. It's able to freely access the staff bots and start speaking to Cassie through them. That's because the original Mimic 01 down in that room is connected to the Pizzaplex. It has branches in all these animatronics, in all these staff bots, Helpy. Mimic 01 is the control center, and they couldn't deactivate it because it's in everything. They'd need to suppress it. They'd need to keep it under control, hence why they built all these nodes in Ruin. And when I say Mimic 01 is the control center, I do mean, yes, the actual Mimic animatronic in that room. This then confidently explains why they cannot deactivate it, because if they did, they'd essentially be taking all their systems offline, because the Mimic 01 program's root folder is in the Mimic 01 animatronic. That explains how it's able to access the Pizzaplex. And this is the really interesting thing about Freddy. When he says, "I am not me," does that mean he's now the Mimic and he's realized he was the Mimic all along? Well, he isn't obviously the Mimic because that's downstairs, it's still there. But the Mimic 01 program is in Freddy and he's starting to realize that he was a Mimic Endo. That was him. He's not a Freddy. He's never been a Freddy. He's been a Mimic. Hence why he says he found himself for the first time. Yes, he found the Mimic. He's been trying to tell us all along in the Endo room. He literally says that he's starting to question his own existence. And when he says, "I am not me," he isn't. He realizes he's not a Freddy, but he can be something more. He can be more than this Freddy. He can be more than this Mimic. He's gaining his own sentience. Well, you might be thinking, well, why didn't he simply remember this before? Why has it now happened? Because he was booted into safe mode and he's been recovering his memories. Let's not forget, Gregory was replacing some of his parts with new ones from the other animatronics, which were not in safe mode. These would then start rekindling other memories in Freddy and potentially other Mimic 01 branches. That's why he actually says the line, "I remember what this is," literally telling us he didn't remember what it was before. When he was coming down there, he had no memory of it, but it started to flow back to him. And the "I am not me" line is an actual opposite to the "it's me" line we've been seeing throughout the FNAF franchise. You know, where they constantly have the Golden Freddy say, "it's me," or "it's me" crops up with other animatronics. The fact that he says, "I am not me" is a stark contrast. It's not him. He is not the Freddy. He is not that Freddy they talked about in the past. He references this several times throughout the game.
I hear what some guests say about me. Bad things happened in the past. But that was not me. Those were older models. Flawed. I would never hurt anyone. You know that, right?
Now, you could argue and say that Freddy's actually referencing other glamrock Freddy animatronics, and I wouldn't be against that either. But this original statement doesn't change. He's not that Freddy. But there's something I'm completely forgetting here. Who says that Freddy even went down to that sinkhole anyway? I mean, that was one ending out of what? Several endings in Security Breach? That might not have happened at all, right? Right? Well, let's take a look at Ruin. The first 5 minutes in Ruin tell a story for us. The environmental storytelling shows us all we need to know. Within the first 5 minutes, you can see papers stuck to the back wall and covering the windows. On these papers, if you zoom in, shows that an earthquake happened at the Pizzaplex. Now, there's only one ending where the earthquake happened. That's right, the ending where Freddy goes down and says all these lines. Now, that does also mean that potentially Burn Trap was down there. Well, we do know that Burn Trap isn't in that room when we get there for Ruin. It's literally the Mimic. Now, one could argue and say, well, we know the earthquake is canon because Tangle was in Ruin. Thus, Tangle created the earthquake, and it didn't mean mean that Freddy went down there, because obviously we don't see Burn Trap. That is correct. But there's two things to continuously tell us that Freddy did go down there and say these lines. The first is that we find Gregory's backpack in the Mimic's room, well, just outside of the Mimic's room, indicating Gregory would have been down there because it's Gregory's backpack, and Gregory would have gone down there with Freddy. And secondly, who's to say that Burn Trap wasn't down there? I mean, in Ruin, we collect Gregory's comic drawings, and they're canon. He literally drew them, and he actually draws the ending where we see Burn Trap and Tangle. Now, why would he draw Burn Trap if he'd never seen him before? Now, I get that that drawing doesn't mean that Burn Trap was there or ever canon. He could have literally just drawn that from his mind, but it seems a stark coincidence that he's referencing one of the endings, and all the events in Ruin point to that ending actually happening, along with the Princess Quest ending, of course. Thus meaning Freddy did in fact go down to the sinkhole and say these lines. This then confidently explains also how Freddy is able to leave the Pizzaplex, because he's breaking his programming. We literally know that he says he cannot leave the Pizzaplex in one of the endings.
Freddy, it's open, let's go!
No, I cannot exit this facility.
Of course you can! Come on, we can hide you somewhere.
Without a recharge station, my systems would shut down within an hour.
But in the ending where he starts to realize he's not a Freddy, he's a Mimic 01 branch, he's able to leave because he's breaking his programming. Nice voice crack there, Twisted. And we actually see the same thing start to happen to Roxy. We know Roxy at the start is infected with a glitch trap virus. She's highly aggressive towards Gregory, which I would be if someone nicked my eyes. But then after the removal of the glitch trap virus, she changes. The Mimic 01 program would then likely be free to change her programming and influence her, which then could explain why she comes to Cassie's aid and how she knows where the Mimic is and why she says the line, "still too weak," because she's seen the Mimic before as well. Not going into that into this video because that's a huge statement. Did it all in this video. We also know that in the CDs we find throughout the Pizzaplex, it mentions subroutines. This could literally be taken as the Mimic 01's personas / branches. This then explains why they keep the Mimic around, so they can mimic the Freddy persona, the Freddy personality. That's why they have it there. But when Freddy booted into save mode at the beginning of Security Breach, it locked out the Mimic program. It also locked out the Glitch Trap program. This is why Freddy goes back to who he actually was, or who he thought he was. But as time goes on, and as we see throughout the game, we get upgraded with the other animatronic parts, and thus the Mimic starts to reactivate, because he was lying dormant inside of him. This could then explain that when he runs out of battery, he kills Gregory. It's because the Mimic has fully took over. So when he actually says, "I am not me," it's because he isn't now. He's no longer a Freddy, but he isn't fully the Mimic. They've kind of combined and he's making his own personality. He's no longer the Freddy we know, or a Freddy under a Mimic persona. He's his own person. He found himself for the first time because he found the original Mimic. But he's changed. He isn't that Mimic, or he isn't a Freddy. Hence why he's not himself. He's a new animatronic. One which will help Gregory. One which will be on the side of good. One which, as he says, will not let anything happen to him. He will protect Gregory with whatever happens. Or will he? You see, we never see him in Ruin. We never see hints of the original Freddy being in Ruin. Sure, we see the prototype missing a head. That could literally be that Freddy asked for a haircut to short back and sides, please. They took too much off the top. That literally isn't the original Freddy. Now, everyone goes into detail how it could be, how it isn't. Steel Wool are hugely into visual storytelling and environmental storytelling. They literally give us the biggest hint and a telltale sign this isn't our boy Freddy because of the prototype mark on his foot. But people are still trying to debunk that. No, Steel Wool literally are telling us that isn't our boy. Don't go against it. And there is no other indication that he is in the Pizzaplex, thus he is left with Gregory. And what's that, you ask? Where have they gone? Well, that would literally be just purely headcanon theory crafting, because there's very little to go on. We'd literally be guessing at this stage. But the evidence suggests he's left with Gregory. Whether the Mimic 01 branch is able to reach him when he's out of the Pizzaplex, or that he's fully now on the side of his own animatronic persona, I'm sure we'll find out in the future. But as Freddy says, I am not me, because he isn't a Freddy. He isn't an old Freddy Fazbear or a glamrock Freddy. He's not like them endos he sees down in the basement. He's his own person now, and he realizes this. He's not part of the Mimic 01, which he was before. He's our boy Freddy. He will protect us through thick and thin, and that's what he was trying to tell us all along. He isn't just some animatronic. He's his own person. We only needed to listen and decipher, and we've done that now. And he shuts the door on the Pizzaplex for good. And with that, I'm shutting breaking the door on this theory. So what do you think? I think it answers why he says, I am not me. That's the only logical explanation I can find. And let's not forget, the only logical reason why they kept the mimic around. Otherwise, you just simply have it destroyed. If it was so dangerous, why not completely dismantle it and deactivate it? Because they cannot. It's the host of their entire operation. Their programming is in the Mimic 01 and thus inside the entirety of the Pizzaplex. But what do you think? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and check out all my other videos on the channel. A huge thanks to the members on screen now and a massive thanks to William Plays 844 and Lauren C, who are golden twisted ones, and Penguin Lover 12, who's actually a twisted animatronic and ultimate theorist. And welcome to our newest member, Rebecca Jewell. I'm Twisted Animatronic, and stay safe out there, superstars.